individuals and organizations who are committed to instituting a culture of good governance and public accountability through active citizenship. Another partner that has brought us talks to us over the last 2 years is the Future Project. The Future Project is a not-for-profit organization that is committed to building empowered citizens across Africa through inclusive enterprise and active citizenship. We also have a partner, BudgIT. BudgIT is a civic organization that applies technology to intersect engagement with institutional improvements to facilitate societal change. My name is Temidayo Taiwo Siddiq. I'm the assistant editor at YNaija, and YNaija is the media partner for Thursday Talks annually and monthly, which has held in the last 2 years. Today, we'll be speaking about the future of governance, leading a people in the era of social distancing. And we have two very, I don't want to use the big words, but I mean, they are faces that are familiar. If you've not seen them before now, at least you must have seen an opinion or read an opinion that they have written. They are very influential in the youth space, and also there are people who a lot of us respect and hold their opinions on issues very seriously. They have large following as expected. So, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are watching or listening from, we would like to welcome our panelists. We have, I don't know the best way to put it, but okay, so I'll just go straight. We have Yinka Ogunubi. Yinka Ogunubi is a financial and economic analyst with the Twitter handle at Yinka Nubi. Is someone who is able to put out very insightful opinions when it comes to understanding the financial aspects of many of the policies that's been done within the Nigerian governance space. We also have Ayo Shogunro. Ayo Shogunro is an academic, is someone who a lot of us also respect because of how much is able to articulate his views and opinions on issues in a way that it makes it usually very simple. And so I'm trying to keep the introduction short so that we can get into the business for the day. We are so pleased to have you, Ayo and Yinka Ogunubi. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Temidayo.
Good evening, Temidayo.
All right. Please, Ayo, I think you would have to increase the volume of, I can't hear you clearly. I think you may need to increase the volume of your microphone. Hello, Ayo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Is this
okay? Your voice is a bit, it's a bit faint. Maybe you could help increase the volume.
I can't hear Ayo. I think maybe you might want to move closer to the device or use a hands-free or something.
Okay,
hello, Ayo.
I think I'll just hold it in my hand. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, it's better now. It's far better.
Okay, great.
All right. So the COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria, largely a lot of us know that it's not an isolated case. Nigeria is not the only country in the world battling the COVID-19 issue, which is why it's described as a pandemic. But we have had the COVID-19 pandemic in the world from December up until February 27th, 2020, when an Italian citizen in Lagos tested positive for the virus. Nigeria didn't have any case. All she had done before this time, talking about the administration at both federal and subnational levels, all the governments at these various levels had done before then was to put measures in place, or were made to believe that measures were being put in place to ensure that we don't suffer casualties. or that the pandemic is properly managed when, if and when it comes to Nigeria. But this changed the tune of preparations when a few days after that, 9th of March 2020, we recorded a second case of the virus as reported in Ewekoro, Ogun State, a Nigerian citizen who had contact with the Italian citizen who was visiting, eventually became the second case. And since then, it's been announcement of cases every evening. I mean, I know a lot of Nigerians, although I hear that a lot of people have moved on now, they don't bother about the statistics because they don't want to be in panic mode. But since then, it's been cases every evening, 11 p.m., 12 midnight, you see cases. At yesterday, we have over 8,000 cases. So gentlemen, I would like to find out from you, first of all, there's been a myriad of reactions to how governments have been handling the case. I want to first of all find out from you before we go into the discussion properly. What's your opinion about how the coronavirus pandemic in Nigeria has been handled so far? I'll start with you, Ayo.
Thanks for that. Well, I think for me, like I always say everywhere, it's been mostly a case of just recognizing the efforts that ordinary people across the country are making by themselves, even sometimes in the absence of effective leadership, to do the right things, from social distancing to proper hygienic and sanitary habits. And, you know, unlike, for example, we see what is going on in the ideal Western countries, the US and America, where the government almost always has to force and convince and persuade people to just do the right things. But here, even though we have spots where, I mean, there's still a lot of, so to say, unsanitary habits going on, most of the time people have tended to just comply without even any serious attempt at enforcement. And I mean, in a sense, also, I think some of the governors too, particularly in Lagos State, have done the best they could within the circumstances and within the resources that they have. And I think that in itself is something worth appreciating, considering what could be.
So, Ayo, thank you very much. I would want to take from all you've said. The summary is that the government in Nigeria, both at the national and state levels, have done the best that they can or that's expected of them, and that largely you are satisfied with some states, especially a state like Lagos, where the response from government angle is largely impressive. I think that would be what.
No, not at all. The people
Okay.
of Nigeria is what I said. The people of Nigeria have done what they could do, even in the absence of effective enforcement. But I'm just saying, when it comes to the government itself and in terms of governance, ideally I would refer to, of course, the Lagos State government specifically, having done over and above most other states. That doesn't make it the ideal. That doesn't mean it's perfect. That doesn't mean it's great, but it's actually far better than what I would have expected, considering the usual circumstances of governance.
Okay, so let's situate it properly now. So you are saying two things. One, that compared to what the response by government across the federation, Lagos State stands out. However, Lagos State response, even though it surpassed your own expectations that you had for them, that Lagos State government is not up to what is expected of governments all over the world.
Yes, that's better summation.
All right. I just wanted to be sure that we get.
But you should not also forget the most important point for me here is the fact that ordinary Nigerians individually and without too much compulsion are actually taking the right steps, because we are all interested in keeping this disease at bay, and a lot of us, well, I am not in Nigeria, but a lot of us, I mean every Nigerian, is doing or are doing the things that are necessary to be done to ensure that public safety and public health is protected.
All right. So for Ayo, he would rather give the bulk of the credits to the Nigerian people who have shown cooperation largely than give it to the government who have done fairly well, except Lagos that he has there to single out. Thank you very much. So we'll move over to Inka. What do you think? What's your own opinion? Do you share the same perspective with Ayo, or is it gloom or joy for you over there where you are?
Well, I'm in Lagos, so I can't.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Ayo is speaking from outside the country, so
I
I'm
can give
trying
a lot.
to.
I can give a lot more testimony to what is happening here. I don't think it's a question of apportioning credit to governors and all that. We Nigerians can see for themselves the states that are trying and those that are not. This is a novel issue. This is one issue that the world did not prepare for. If it did, we will not be seeing the kind of numbers we're seeing in the West, places like the US, Italy, Spain, even the UK. So what you're seeing is that countries are learning, as things in fact, practically every day. The whole idea of social distancing, the whole idea of face masking that we're doing right now, it's not because we learned it 10 years ago or whatever. It's mainly because of the things that lessons that we are learning every day as we battle this virus. So I want to agree that Nigerian people are doing their best. They have to create a balance between safety and living, because most people earn their living through activities that they have to do every day. And so when you find yourself in a lockdown situation, it's pretty hard to keep your sense of objectivity intact. When you're faced with that decision of, should I go out and get infected, or should I go out, probably get infected but leave, or should I stay in, not get infected but die? So I would say that the government is trying. They will not, there's no way you can grade any government and you say they've done well when people are dying. So you will always have to just look at the efforts of those who are on the front lines of this battle. Those are the healthcare workers who are the real soldiers on the field, and assess their work. So my own approach really is I have seen a lot of mistakes, I've seen a lot of errors, I've seen a lot of things that they probably should have done well. I mean, for instance, maybe we should have shut down the airports or the borders much longer before we did. Maybe we should have started testing more earlier than we did. Maybe, there are lots of maybes that you will see, but I really don't want to focus on all those. Maybe we should have, could have, whatever. But I want to focus on the healthcare workers, those who are on the front lines of this battle, and give them all the support that they need. So if that support means that I should not probably criticize them, I will rather focus on encouraging them, supporting them, so that they can do the best they can do, so that everybody can, put an end to this pandemic and we can go back to life as normal, whatever normal is.
Okay, I take it that thank you very much. I mean, I take it that as an opinion leader, what you are saying from indirectly is that as much as you've seen errors in the containment measures, you would largely want to focus on the positives and solutions, so that we don't complicate what is on ground already. And
exactly.
I get that point, but as much as we want to discuss, this is supposed to be an issue-based conversation, but we cannot discuss the pandemic, have a robust view on this robust conversation on this pandemic without situating some special issues that we have seen, so that we're able to understand, because we have journalists on this platform, we have many leaders of thought and other people who would take whatever we have discussed here out, articles waiting on this. So it's important that we're able to situate these things properly. So I want to ask concerning the flip-flops in policy that you've talked about. One of the most worrisome development that has come out of the national handling to this pandemic, and I would want people to react to this quickly, is, so Yinka talked about delay in closing the airspace, that perhaps that could have saved us saved us cases. We would not have had this much case, I would believe. But there's this part that generated a lot of uproar and outrage, the part about Chinese experts, so-called Chinese experts, who a lot of persons protested against their coming in at the time. And eventually, the word from the government at the time was that these people were coming to assist the efforts of the Presidential Task Force and the NCDC, since they were coming from China, who had, to a large extent, overcame their own challenge. So a few weeks ago, a few days ago, the Minister of Health was asked of their whereabouts, and you could see that he was visibly angry, and he said nobody asked him such a question anymore, that these people are not in his custody. He doesn't know anything about them and all of those things, until the Minister of Interior came around to clarify that with Chinese construction engineering company, a construction company in the country. So, and that the reason why they have been unable to leave is because the airspace is short. So when you look at, when you put these two statements side by side, we have to bring the people even the airspace, that it's puts a dent on the trust that's already government. I have talked about government being
Let me tell you,
you also talk about, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're back now.
You were breaking.
Oh, okay. So let me just summarize. I'm just trying to say that the whole issue around the airspace being closed, and that's why Chinese cannot come, that's a flip-flop in policy. I mean, it's just like the government is not sure of what it wants to achieve. And you know that this in itself can cause issues for the people trusting government and the measures they are taking. What do you think about this? Don't you think that that's an example of a situation that shows that government may not necessarily have been doing the right things all the while? I'll start with Yinka.
Well, see how long it took you to ask that question. It took a long time, and that's exactly what I'm trying to say, that when you focus on a lot of all those, where the Chinese, this one said this, that one said that, he said, she said, and all this kind of, you lose focus. The focus right now should be on saving lives. It should be on how do we improve governance. And I think that's what this conversation is all about today, the future of governance. So how do we improve governance? Looking at how we do things currently. Because if you define governance, strictly, it's about doing what the politics says you should do. So the politics says that, there are institutions of government, or, you need to have education, you need to have electoral processes, you need to have healthcare, you need to have policing, you need to have all this kind of things. And then it sets up institutions, or, to do it. By the way, whenever there's any law passed in Nigeria, there's always an institution that is enshrined with the responsibility of managing that. So that's what the politics decides. The governance is to then manage that in a way to ensure that the people are served in one way, or the other. So, and the reality right now is that there is a way that we have been doing things. There is a way that we have been doing things now, currently, which in the COVID and post-COVID world, we can't keep doing things that same way. So the question really for us is that, seeing what is going on right now, seeing the changes that COVID-19 has forced us to make, what do we do for governance for the future? I think that's what we should focus on. And quite frankly, I'm not interested in who said
Yeah, sorry.
Chinese or not Chinese. That.
Yeah, I
maybe
get.
you want to focus on that, but I'm particularly not interested in those kind of conversations.
Okay, so let me explain something. I get your point, and we are focused on the future. We're just trying to build a background for some other questions that will be asked. So what I wanted to bring out from that question is that you said that we should focus on solutions, and I'm saying that, don't you see an issue where you would agree with me, Ayo also would agree with me, that a lot of persons in Nigeria do not believe that the pandemic is the way the government is putting it. They don't believe that we're in a dire situation. They believe that this is an avenue for government to loot. So you already have a case of distrust. And that's the point I want to bring at that. And there's a background to distrust. Issues like what happened with the Chinese expat is an example of what has led to cases like this. So I'm saying that going forward, don't you think that government needs to address issues like that? They should come up with a particular position and stand by it, so that you don't have the citizens you are trying to make believe what you are doing, at the same time they are repelling your solution.
Let me die off. We need to focus on more serious things.
All right.
Whether or not Chinese people are lost or not, for me, they are just irrelevancies that takes a lot of our time, and we lose time, valuable time, that we should focus on the most important things. The most important things right now are, how do we amend our laws to ensure that we prepare for the post-COVID world? We focus on so many irrelevancies.
All right.
Nigeria has a trust deficit with the government. It was there 20 years ago. It will be there 20 years from now. And if the press decides to focus on all those things, I think it's left to us that are on the advocacy side, on the civil society side, to focus on the most important things, about how do we drive the conversation forward, and how do we improve good governance, for Nigeria. I'm not interested in selling newspapers for media houses and the kind of salacious, sensational stories that they want to talk about. That's for them. But I think for us, we should focus on the important things.
All right. Thank you very much. So, I'll come to you. Now, we are talking about the future now. We've seen that a lot of these states, even before now, are unable to pay wages of salaries of their workforce. And like we all know that the pandemic was not expected. It was not something we planned for. So what advice would you be giving? In what way do you think state governments, who naturally before now would already complain of issues of they don't have enough internal generated revenue, the allocations is patchy, monies are not enough. So we already know, the finance minister has said recently that Nigeria is heading for recession. So I want to find out from you, Ayo, what are those key things that you would want to see from the state governments, especially who are closer to the people than the federal government, in the aspect of ensuring that these complaints about finance don't rear its head?
So I'm not quite sure if I understand the question, but to reinterpret it, are you asking what you think, or what I think anyway, the state government should have to do now if they are going to be able to efficiently tackle the issues that are going to be coming up in the next few months. Is that the case?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, questions like this are a little bit problematic because it almost always involves me taking the position where I, in a sense, believe in the way the country is currently structured and the way states operate, which, as anybody who knows me or who's read me for a while knows, I do not agree with, because like I always tell people, the existing system of governance we have in Nigeria today, the highly centralized economic system and command from the top-down system, the ways in which states are heavily dependent on the central government or the federal government for a lot of their own policies and how they would generate revenue and how they would execute issues and their security. For me, all of this is anachronistic. It's a relic of colonial and military rule that is not very suited for the kind of deep grassroots level efficiency that is needed for modern governance, especially when we are talking of a situation like a pandemic. We need a situation where every local government has registers, has data on every resident within that local government. We need a situation where every local government knows exactly how many people in this local government are students, how many people in this local government are teachers, how many people in this local government are professionals, are petty traders, are working in the formal or informal sector. It's a very large database that should not be managed from Abuja, neither should it be managed from the state capital. It has to be managed from the most local of all the units of government. And then you build that up. So the state government's role, ideally, would be to collect information from across all the local governments and then use that information to make wider statewide policy. But right now, we have a situation where our local governments are still not much more than tax collecting, market rates collecting, dustbin, and what do you call it, the trash cleaners. And the state government sit down with little or no data to make policies across the entire state that, yes, might benefit a few people living in the more urban sides of town, but really might be negatively impactful on other people who are not so close to the centers of commerce. And so that's why I'm like, this question itself, it requires a lot of unpacking of the structures of government first. So I'm not sure what I can advise within the existing structure that would make sense and that would work in terms of governance. Yes, it will work for a few, but whether it will work for a lot, that is going to be debatable.
All right, thank you very much. Inga, you heard IO is advocating for better collation of data. Without data, you can hardly plan properly, and planning will be ineffective. And that's the reason why he said that's the only solution that he sees that it's feasible within this system that is largely defective. I mean, every one of us know that there's a lot of things wrong with the kind of federalism that we practice. It's been a subject of debate whether to restructure or not. But I want to find out from you. He's talked about the local government being reduced to nothing more than collection of rates and all of that, whereas governance doesn't get to the people. So I want to find out from you. You heard the news about the Cross River State governor, what the Cross River State government announced lately about reduction of the burden on the urban poor through the tax measure and all that. You are a financial expert, so I want to find out from you, Yinka, what do you think about that, and how do you think that such policies can influence governance for the nearest future across the states of the Federation?
I think some of those policies, they are populist, they sound nice when you hear them. I'm more concerned about how does it fit into a larger plan. So what's the plan? The next 20, 25 years. So how does it fit into it? It's you know, when you look at a state, you'll find out that apart from, I mean, there are some states that they can easily survive without internally generated revenue. But in reality, most states, you know, rely on internally generated revenue to do certain things. And a major part of that internally generated revenue comes from payee, the payee tax. In fact, over 80%, in some cases up to like 90% of income of IGR of states come from payee. You know, so so when you give that kind of policy, my question really is, what are you trying to do? You know, it sounds populist. Many people will like it, they will clap for it, but in the scheme of things, it doesn't really solve much. You know, because those set of people that you're trying to give relief to in the first place, they probably don't even pay any tax anyway. So we're not even getting anything from them. So you lose nothing in effect. I think that going forward, we have to begin to look at the way we do governance in Nigeria. And it has to cut across. You know, we're focused on the executive, but really in reality, we should be focused on the executive, on the legislature, on the judiciary as well. Because the way that we do governance for every tier of government, you know, in that has to change. It has to be reflective of what, you know, the future requires of us, and not just in terms of income for the state, but also survival of the citizenry, the education of the people. As we sit here today, right now, there is a tier of our educational system that is completely cut off from education. That's the tertiary institutions. None of the tertiary institutions, except those who are in private universities, are actually doing online learning right now. Why? Because ASU says we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the capacity to do online learning. We can't do it, basically. Really. I was reading today that Pan African University decided to gift 3 gigabytes of data every week to their students so that they can come online. You know, those are the challenges that we face. The justice system, you know, there's so many things, you know. So I will like us to be more. I would like the state government to you know, to kind of just put a halt on politics for once, populist policies that don't go anywhere, and start to think about reforms, laws, policies, changing some of the things that we do. The bureaucracy of governance itself is a problem. The bureaucracy of governance in Nigeria is a problem. And we need to find a way of fast-tracking that process. You know, it's a good thing, some of the things we're hearing. I mean, CAC, for instance, before the pandemic, had moved its process from this, you know, come to the office, file paper and whatever, to an online process. So today you can actually register a business name completely online without having to leave your house. That's good. That's part of improving governance. Today now the FEC, Federal Executive Council, is meeting online, virtually. 2 years ago, if the FEC had met online, I'm sure one Ganifa Naimi wannabe lawyer will have woken up in the morning and gone to court and you know, found something in the law to say that they are not supposed to even meet offline. But today they're meeting offline. I mean, they are meeting online, and policies have been decided because of that. You know, so today judgments are being given by courts through remote access. So these are the things that we have to start to look at about the future, and how do we bring everybody, how do we include everybody? I'll give an example. Lagos State, for instance, one of the most developed states in Nigeria, if not the most developed state in Nigeria, could have at some point said, you know what, we will move all our educational lessons online when we said students must not go to school. I know I'm diverting, I'm digressing from your question, but I just want to frame it in a way that I think that a lot of people can connect to. So Lagos said, Lagos could have said, we're going to move everybody online. So every secondary school, whatever, go online and all that, and go to school from there. But they realized that in doing that, they're going to exclude a large percentage of their populace. So what did Lagos State government do? They went to radio. And the commissioner said, we chose radio because it was a common denominator. Everybody has a radio. So a lot of people thought it was funny, but in reality, it was actually a very commendable thing to do, because it was them looking at the situation they had now and trying as much as possible to ensure that policies are guided towards ensuring that the larger percentage of people benefit, and that we are positioned in a place that everybody can benefit.
Sorry, I will have to interrupt you. I will have to interrupt you, Inka. So because of our time, I see that you are passionate about solutions and the future, but I mean, the present is as important as the future. So I want to find out from you. You have said that there seems to be so much focus on the executive. You want to see reforms, you want to see laws, you want to see a reduction in the bureaucratic bottlenecks. Now, can you just tell us like one or two major laws, whether at the national level or at the state level, one or two areas that you feel that we need critical legislation on to achieve this future that you're talking about? Because radio, for example, is not sustainable. It's easy to say radio is a common denominator and all of that. I was impressed particularly with I think it's the Lagos State government that said, or the Akwa Ibom State government, I'm not quite sure now, that said they were creating to transfer all of the lessons that the secondary school students have been taught on radio and TV into a website so that people can access it. That seems like a better solution, but we know that some of these measures are still defective. So I want to find out from you, since you have said we should not focus on the executive alone, what are two major areas you want to see critical legislation on to see that we're able to achieve?
All right, okay. Let me quickly, contextualize it and just make it short. I think that there needs to be capacity building. Capacity building, not just in terms of infrastructure, but also in terms of personnel, ensuring that we have the right set of people in the right, places to ensure that things are done. I think there's a need for a bit of technology also. In the private sector, it was really easy to move from working from office to working from home, because there were what you call ERPs, enterprise resource processes in place that allowed you to be able to work effectively. All you needed just a VPN at home that connects you to the office server, and then you're fine. Most government offices were shut during the lockdown and they couldn't do anything because the processes are too manual. It needed you to be there. So that's two. And then three, we need to amend, look for amend certain laws to make it to fast track the process. I'll give you one example. The Public Procurement Act, for instance, fantastic law. It creates the opportunity for transparency in procurement processes. But in reality, what it did was that it turned a system, a bureaucratic system that was running at 40 kilometers per hour, it made it run at 20 kilometers per hour. Because the demands of that law on the Nigerian state, on the Nigerian civil service itself, that is very inefficient, made things that projects that ordinarily should have come at 1 year or 2 years, made it come much, much longer. So we have to look at such laws to say, how can we make such laws critical, relevant to the time? How can we fast track the process of governance? Today, if you have to report a crime, Timidayo, you have to physically go to the police station. As of today, I mean, so if you're going to start, if you have an issue that needs criminal justice on your side, you have to physically go to a police station to file a report. There's no process today that allows you to file a report from the comfort of your house. How do you change that? You change that by the laws. So the laws must reflect that. Another example, let me just give this last example so that it's not like I'm talking too much. Okay, take the bill that is currently being discussed in the House, in the National Assembly, the prevention of the
infectious disease
bill.
prevention.
One
bill.
of the challenges you had with that bill was that the National Assembly wanted to quickly fast track it, and that got a lot of people concerned. That hey, why are you rushing this thing? What's the problem? And guess what they said? Oh, we have to remove. We can't do what do you call these things? This public hearing because of social distancing. We can't do public hearing because of social distancing. But civil society organizations came and say, hey, we can do public hearing, but it's virtual. We don't have to be present in a space to do it. But you see, it takes reforms of the rules of the House to be able to get that done. And I'm happy that civil society organizations are actually planning a virtual public hearing to show the National Assembly that it's possible to do a public hearing without people being there. So these are examples that I think that forces us to be able to look at our processes today and see how we can make them relevant for the future. And by the way, this future we're talking about is not far. It's actually here. We're actually living in that future right now.
All right, thank you very much. So Ayo, I'll just leave you to, before we go into elections. Election is the next segment of conversations we'll be having. I want to ask you, Ayo, do you want to react to all of the things that Yinka has said?
Oh, yes. I like everything Yinka has said. It's beautiful, it's great. It's very clearly elucidates all the inflection points or the pressure points in our systems and what essentially should be done about all of this. But what I would add to this, which I think is the larger issue, is that we have never really been lacking in a lot of these kinds of solutions. If you go as far back as Nigeria's history, from 1960 to date, you would always find experts, you would always find policies, you always find blueprints for proper planning for all kinds of situations. It's why we have a lot of industries still, if you could call them industries, from the banking sectors to the securities exchange sectors to even the airlines. We've had again and again all these kind of reform processes. But what has been lacking in a sense are the more intangible things like accountability, things like the political will for the government to actually push back against elitism, against inequality. Because a lot of these things, in principle, would not be difficult, except for the fact that, one, there is essentially what we started this conversation from, a deficit of trust in the government, which makes it harder for people to buy along into plans that experience has taught them again and again and again would almost ultimately mean nothing at the end of the day. Almost all the beautiful plans, all the beautiful processes that has been instituted in Nigeria over the last 5 decades has, at the end of the day, only benefited a few. So the question is, how do we put these plans in place? How do we put these solutions in place? And at the same time, ensure that there are accountability systems and that there are also a process of ensuring that there is equal access and equal opportunity to all of these things. And that is why the issue of the minister and the Chinese people, while it may seem like drama at first blush, plays again into the issue of accountability. Every time we take money and we use it for something, yet at the end of the day, somehow we can't see the effect of these things. So I'm sure if we draw up 10 people now from different sectors, lawyers, economists, professionals of all kinds, They would all have great blueprints, which the government would say it would implement. But what happens afterwards? Who is the person who watches the watchmen, as they say? How? And this is not just a question of corruption. It's a question of, the kind of laws we have, laws that give so much executive discretion, so much opportunity for patronage, and for a case of whoever is closest to the power systems is the one who gets the most benefit out of these policies or principles. And I think that is where governance needs to come to the level of everyday people, by the government themselves acknowledging that, look, we and the processes we use have not exactly been found, at least empirically, to favor the ordinary person, the person who is born in a slum, the person who is born in a creek, the person who is born in all kinds of places. Yes, and again, I accept what Yinka said about like using the radio systems. But again, these things are emergency responses in a time of emergency. What happens when the emergency itself passes and we return to a kind of normal, whether the new normal or the old normal? Would the government still carry along everybody in these activities, or would we revert to status quo where inequality and elitism were the order of the day? And if the government is going to carry along everybody, what measures are we going to put in place now to ensure that it's not just in the discretion of the governor or the discretion of the local government chairperson, and that it is actually an institutional fact that when you do things, you must do it in a way that everybody is included, so that when the next emergency arises, that is not when you start running around trying to plug all the gaps. Yeah, that's all.
All right, thank you. Ayo, please just hold it. I want to also find out from you. I mean, you are someone that is passionate about active citizenship. I mean, people demanding accountability from them. So I want to find out from you, with this new normal, sort of, do you think that active citizenship is under threat? You think that this social distancing and the many issues that we have been confronted with by the pandemic, do you think that it has a lot of implications for active citizenship?
Well, I mean, every day of our lives, every kind of active citizenship is always under threat. It's a general principle that those in power do not always like the criticisms from outsiders. I mean, there are always excuses for it, whether you don't understand, or it is tough, or it is not what it seems, or we are working on other things. All of that is a different kind of excuses. But in terms of threats that are relevant to today's period, yes, I suppose the very first thing would be the freedoms and the opportunities for, or what do you call it, exercising those freedoms that are currently curtailed under emergency rules, not just in Nigeria, but across the whole world. And even the most democratic countries today, like South Africa, where I am, are under severe emergency. For example, in South Africa right now, the government puts a ban on the sale of alcohol and cigarettes for over 3 months, or for almost 3 months. That's like a wide use of power. It's almost Sharia-like if you think of it. And yet it's considered as part of the emergency measures that the government is taking because there is a pandemic in society at the moment. But the question is, when these powers, when these emergency restrictions begin to cut into more important areas of public activity, like the freedom to assemble, the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, or the idea that the government can begin to regulate people's lives in ways that are highly invasive, then I think we'll begin to have a cause for concern. But I like what Inka said earlier about the fact that none of this is really new in a setup like Nigeria. If we already had an ideal system in the first place, then we can begin to worry about how the pandemic is curtailing and biting into all of these things we used to have. But I would say in Nigeria, active citizenship has always been under threat, even way before the pandemic. So it's just a case of finding new ways to deal with the same issue.
All right, thank you very much. So very quickly, we'll move into elections. Elections are a key part of governance. And right now, not just Nigeria, many states around the world are currently in a dilemma as to how do we forge ahead with democratic processes. Elections will be held Edo State on September 18th, and elections will be held in Ondo on the 10th of October. These dates were fixed long before the issue of pandemic arose. Now, INEC has said that they are going ahead with those dates, but they've ruled out a number of measures that they will be putting in place to ensure that the process is compliant with safety standards. Now, I want to find out from you, if you were in the position of INEC, do you think that it is necessary to go ahead with the elections in this way, considering that we have a large illiterate population, if not in terms of reading and writing, but at least in terms of common processes, standards, and conformity to lay down laws and order? Then that's on one hand. I also want to find out from you, do you think that democracy is under threat, considering the fact that INEC has said there will not be continuous voters registration, and by so doing, you know that a lot of persons will be disenfranchised, those who have just turned 18 and those who couldn't register before? So I'll start with you, Yinka. Two questions, let me rephrase it again. Do you think that democracy is under threat with INEC's position on no to continuous voters registration? And do you also share the view that the election has to be held on these dates that were previously chosen?
Those are two very good questions. And for me, these are the kind of things that we need to empanel a think tank of eggheads and just put them in a room and just say, you know what, just go and think about something and tell us what to do. But I'll tell you my thoughts. Number one, I think these are an example of the kind of situation where we need to amend our laws. The issue of election and access to vote is dicey. There's a school of thought that thinks that the right to vote in Nigeria is not firm. It's not enshrined in the Constitution, because Chapter 4 of the Constitution does not include the right to vote. It includes the rights of, right to life, right to free assembly, right to free speech, all those fundamental rights. But it doesn't include the right to vote. But we know that every democracy rides on the right of each individual to cast a vote and choose a candidate, which means that the state must make all the instruments available for everybody, whether it's a man, a woman, whether it's able or disabled, whether it's rich or poor, whether it's Hausa or Igbo, whatever, to vote. And so there must be access. So here you have a challenge. How do you provide access to vote and safety in terms of social distancing? So that's the challenge that you have with that an INEC will have. And that's where I think the laws have to come in. For instance, the law provides that in Nigeria, the vote must take place on one day. And so even though we can excuse the fact that, okay, only 50% of voters actually show up anyway, so okay, maybe you can manage the number. But the question we should ask ourselves is, must voting take place one day? Must it take place in one day? Can we scale the votes over 3 days, over 1 week? In some countries in the West, they vote over a period of 1 month. In fact, in some cases, you can actually mail in your vote, your ballot. You request for a ballot, and then it goes in. And connect to what Ayo had said earlier. If you have a complete list of the number of people in a local government, you have their list, you have their data, it shouldn't really be a problem trying to identify who cast a vote. So the laws, we have to look at the electoral laws. How can the law be amended in such a way that allows us to be able to not exclude anybody, no matter the nature of their access, but also safeguard them in terms of their health, so that they don't, in time to exercise their franchise, they don't put themselves at risk at the same time. And The first question was what actually? I think.
Do you think that it is necessary to go ahead with the current dates that have been set for the election?
Yeah. I think, I'm not so sure that there's anything they can do. I mean, they are restrained by law right now. I mean, so unless the Electoral Act itself is amended between now and September, and that in itself will be a big accomplishment if the political forces can come together and agree on something. They don't have a choice but to run with what they have. And that's why I say that governance, as we know it, is doing what the politics says it is. That's governance. So if the politics says you do your election on one day, okay, that's it. That's what you have to run with. So you're going to have to.
Are you saying that there's no room to think outside the box, even with the kind of
there's a room to think outside the box now. That's what we're doing right here. And I started this conversation by saying that.
No, not you. I'm saying for those in government, you don't think that there's a room to think outside the box, even when the law says this? Is there no way to bend the?
I'm not a lawyer. Maybe I can speak more to that. But if the law says you do your elections on one day, who are you to come and say you want to do it in 2 or 3 days? You're going to just create challenges for yourself, for lawyers to eventually, go to the election tribunals and create issues for the court. So you can. The INEC has some kind of flexibility that they can work around. So they come out with guidelines, and some of those guidelines they are allowed to do so by the law. So if the law gives them, the Electoral Act itself gives them the latitude to be able to say, you know what, you can scale the number of days for election, or you can look at electronic means of election, for instance, or you can look at other means of making sure that a large number of people don't gather one day. Because the challenge you have really here is that a large number of people are going to have to gather one day. And how do you maintain social distancing for those people within the hours of election? So the only logical thing that makes sense.
I'm afraid I have to stop you. Sorry, Inka, I'm very sorry. I have to stop you because we're trying to keep to time. Ayo, sorry, the same question, but I just want to add something to for you to also give your voice, lend your voice to, because of what Yinka said. Now, Yinka is insinuating that when we have staggered elections over a number of days, that will be a critical reform that will help the process. That we are largely constrained by the law which says that we should have one. But the history of elections in Nigeria, especially in the Fourth Republic, shows that the staggered elections are the ones that are more problematic. A case in hand would be the Kogi and Bayelsa elections, and Oshun, we could go on and on, Ekiti. Now, a lot of these elections, that the hope of Nigerians is that, okay, since the focus of INEC is just on one state, you now have a case where there's increased violence, the level of tension becomes so high, and in the long run, you are wondering, are we having elections or we're having a court battle? So I want you to also react to that while you answer the first two questions I asked earlier.
Thank you very much. Just so to briefly look at the whole point of all of this is the fact that, yes, the whole purpose of a democracy is to ensure that every person in the society is represented in government in some way, that everybody has a way of contributing to the formation of the government. And the best way, or the most direct way to do this, is through an election, which everybody has an equal vote. Now, the point of an election is to ensure that it is free and it is fair. But how do you make it free and fair? You make it free and fair by ensuring that everybody has an equal opportunity. Everybody who is eligible has an equal opportunity to vote. Everybody has an equal opportunity to campaign. Everybody has unhindered access to the voting, to the voting machinery or platform or ballots. And there is transparency, and I think this is the most important one. There is transparency and trust in the entire process by the people who are participating in it. And then you can also consider that also the results at the end of the day must reflect actually what the people who went through all of this process put down there. Those are all the points. And the issue for any electoral institution or any electoral agency is, how do we translate all of these things into practice? If the best way to do it is for everybody to line up by the side of the road and raise up their hand and be counted manually, then that is the best way to do it. The issue is not so much that there is a good way or a better way of holding elections. The issue is, what is the way that most reflects a free and fair process? And so, for example, you could argue that, electric voting, electronic voting, or offline voting, or any kind of voting is better than thumb printing. Nothing is better. If you have a technology, if you deploy a technology that is not trusted or has not been tested, it's just going to be as bad for the election as direct rigging, because people will contest it. So the question again that should be at the back of our minds is, what will give us a free and a fair process at the end of the day? And now, so we come here, we are in a coronavirus situation. We have a pandemic. What will give us a free and a fair process? Like Inka noted at the beginning, this is not something that any one of us seated here can directly legislate or even suggest and say this is it. Because what is most important is that there is a process that is beginning to put in place right as we are seated now. In fact, that process should have started since last week, if not last month, on how do we begin to create a new electoral system that should address the challenges we face now. This means that this new system must be one that reinforces the sanitary habits, the social distancing habits that we already have in place now. And to do this, you cannot just have somebody in Abuja create a new set of rules. That would not work. You need it to be a collaborative effort. You need all the political parties to be seated at the table right now, at least the ones that are in power anyway. You need representatives from different state governments or whatever to be seated at the table right now. You need experts in constitutional law as well as in electoral practice to be seated at that same table. And you need, in some sense, public opinion also. What do we all think? All of this is not child's play. All of these are things that takes time and effort. It takes some kind of seriousness of dedication for people to, or for us to be able to achieve this. And then when you do all of this, then what Inka said, you legalize it, the outcome. It reflects it in the new process, either as a kind of emergency subsidiary legislation that would no longer, that would be disbanded as soon as the pandemic is judged to be over, or as a part of the standard legislation, which would have effect in the coming years as well. And then you run a test to verify whether this process can work before you actually have any election. And when that is done, then you go. So whether the election is 2 days or across a month or just 1 day becomes secondary to the question of whether it can guarantee a free and fair process. So once you are sure that doing it in 1 day would bring a free and fair process, then fine, 1 day. If you are sure that, or if you are not convinced that doing it in 1 day will guarantee a free and fair process, then stagger it. And by stagger here, I understand that what Yinka is saying is that it's not that it will be conducted on different days in different states, but that one election can take a while to collate, to vote and to collate. So for example, you can start the election on January 1 and end it on January 30. Meaning between January 1 and January 30, you all have the chance, just as we do in registration, you all have the chance to vote. So we don't register everybody in 1 day. We register them across time because that is what has proven effective. So the same thing to let us vote across time if that is what will prove effective. But effectiveness here is not just about what is the fastest way or what is the most expeditious way or what is the most technologically compatible way. No, it's not even what is the most coronavirus compatible way. It is what is the freest and fairest way, focusing again on the equal opportunity for all to vote, to campaign, and to have access, and then transparency throughout the whole process. So again, this is not a let us tell you what will happen or how it should be done. It is something that requires everybody to sit down, reflecting diverse interests, diverse views, because that is how you build trust in the process. I can assure you that if President Buhari meets with APC members today and they sit down and draft a new amendment and they pass it, that election would be illegitimate, because people are going to say it doesn't favor them, it only favors the ruling party. So that is why collaboration at this stage is very important. But the question again is, do we have the kind of country where there is enough political will to generate this kind of process?
All right, thank you so much. We would round up with this, but I want to find out from our partners, EiE. Please, do we have questions from the audience? Do we have people watching who have questions? Hello, Dapo.
Yes, Timidayo.
All right.
Someone has asked, yeah, so Yano asked that, so should we dismantle the bureaucracy? It's really slowing things down.
Okay. Is that the only question we have?
Yes.
Okay. Yinka, you want to react to that? Do we dismantle bureaucracy? Since you have said that bureaucracy is a major issue in governance, you cited example with the Bureau of Public Procurement, how it elongated the process and all that. So what do you think?
The short answer is no. We don't dismantle bureaucracy. And I'll give you the reason why. So the long answer is bureaucracy is very important, it's needed. There's a need, there's a reason why you need a chain of command, to be able to ensure that right approvals are obtained and all that. The bigger an organization gets, the more bureaucratic it will get. So it's not just even a matter of government. It also exists in private institutions. The bigger it gets, the more the reporting line gets stretched. What we need to do is we need to fast track the process. And that's why I make a difference. So bureaucracy is good, but we need to fast track that process. And the example I gave to fast track it is to use technology. So we achieve two things by doing technology. We get more effectiveness and efficiency in terms of speed to do what we used to do before, but also we are able to curb corruption. I didn't say stop corruption. I said curb corruption, because now people don't need to have to be physically in a place for a file to move from one table to the other. All you need to do is send in your document, make sure it's correct, and then the authorizing officers will look at that and then approve and move to the next table. If we don't fast track the process in a post-COVID world, we're going to be putting ourselves in a lot of mess. And we're already behind in a lot of countries because we have not upgraded our civil service systems to using enterprise resource processes and softwares and all that. But if we don't take this opportunity to do so right now, we're only going to make things worse. So just to recap, no, we don't need to stop bureaucracy. What we need to do is fast track the process by using the right tools, by having the right technology, by increasing capacity, install capacity to be able to achieve that.
Thank you very much. Now, we'll be ending the session in about 14 minutes from now, and we'll be ending with the economy. But before that, I want to also talk about this election issue. So let's do a comparative analysis. I was reading a document today online that showed that since the beginning of the pandemic, about 9 countries have been able to go about some form of democratic electoral process, or one electoral process or the other. And there's also a statistic that shows that about 9 countries currently, the surge in COVID-19 cases came as a result of one of the things that was related to electoral process. For example, until a mass rally was held in Spain, the cases they had was not as much as at the beginning. We also have a case in Iran where they saw a spike in cases because of the elections that held in February. And just recently, President Macron called off the first round of voting in France. That has generated a lot of debate. People are saying, oh, perhaps is it because his party is losing or something? And then the very big example is one of South Korea everybody is referring to, such that we had the South Koreans had the highest turnout when it comes to voters turnout for elections, 60-something% during this pandemic. And what was most impressive for me in the South Korea case was that even COVID-19 patients were able to vote from their wards. And when you put all of this together, it boils down to one thing. It boils down to data. In Nigeria, we have driver's license, we have international passport, we have a voter's card, we have a national identity card. There's so much, and the government is still struggling to harmonize data. Added to this is the fact that we're supposed to have a census in 2016 after the last census in 2006. And we had a lot of Nigerians were not ready for a census, as in the mood of the nation then haven't just come from 2015 election that put the country between North and South. I'm sure the government thought it wise that it was not wise to hold a census at that time. But we are witnessing the 5th year of this administration since 2015. And you and I know that there's no plan whatsoever to hold a census. The harmonization of biometric is still an issue. So it is easy to say the Edo and Ondo election should go ahead, but how can we make progress without data? How can we ensure that, because even planning in itself, you need data. The president wants a loan and for key projects and so many things. I want to find out from you. I know you will say that it's not for you to decide alone, or it's not for you to have all of the answers. But I want to find out from you, Yinka and Ayo. There's so much implication for the political and electoral system. Without data, what do you think have been done? And if we cannot do anything without data, what should be our major focus for the political and electoral system? Ayo, let's go.
So, yeah, I don't know how to really address this again.
There was a lot packed in there, so I was wondering how to unpack all that myself.
You basically want us to pull a rabbit out of a hat now. But again, you see, for me, that's why I say, look, maybe I'll just echo what Yinka said about politics and governance now. We are where we are right now. That is what we are now. You can do one of two things. You can either decide that, look, nothing is going to make sense, nothing is going to work. Let us put a freeze on everything from governance in Aso Rock all the way to Lagos, all the way to Abuja, and let us sit down and work on the process from scratch that would make sense. That process would start first by putting a new constitution in place, by ensuring that the constitution empowers local levels of government much more than it empowers the central level of government, and that local governments will begin to do all the things they need to do. Because again, don't forget, it's easier to count from the bottom up than to count from the top to the bottom. If people at local levels count, give verifiable data to top levels, it's easier that way than from somebody at the top to say, let me start and count everybody all the way to the bottom. But that aside, the point is, we do not have any of that now. We do not have any of that in place. I wish in ordinary times, if these were ordinary times, I wish we could just put a freeze on everything Nigeria, sit down at the table and restart afresh, because there are so many things we need to plug that it doesn't make sense to even just start plugging this, plugging that, plugging this, plugging that. Everything is connected, everything is interrelated. And if you have to fix so many things to get it to work, then why not change the entire system itself? That is my own philosophy.
All right.
But right now we're in a pandemic. Now is not the time to enter a constitutional rechanging or resetting process. I mean, it's something to think of as we move out of the pandemic. But right now, like you said, the elections are going to take place in the next couple of months. So all of this is not going to happen before that. Even if we start the process, it's not going to be finished before those. So I would just say, go ahead with what you have now and manage it as best as you can. Allow people to what do you call it? To protect or self-protect themselves, give opportunity for self-protection. It's basically what you are all doing right now. And hopefully when this is over, we'll sit down and reassess the entire situation from scratch.
All right, Mika, we want to rush through this. Yeah, your opinion?
No, I concur with what Ayo said. I think data is important. I think it's you can never overstate the need for data. And we're where we are today because we don't have data. We cannot say, for instance, that we are 200 million people. I mean, the data says we are 200 million people because we're able to extrapolate and use.
That thing is just guesswork, to be honest.
We're able to use batch rates and all those kind of things. So we're dashing ourselves numbers every year, because they say that our population increases at about 3 point something percent, every year. But we need to have real data, So if we can't have a census, then we should be able to collate all the data that we have currently. I did an analysis for some set of people the other day, and I said that from my own analysis, I don't think that our population should be anything more than 110, 120 million. That you can look at data for cell phones, data for election, the whole electoral
your biometric
PVCs. You see, when you take some of those things, when you just take them and just put them together, and you identify what you call the margin of error in between them, you can almost see that, and then you extrapolate for numbers that will not be captured, like children and things like that. It's very hard for you to come to a number close to 200 million for Nigerians. You probably will get somewhere closer to 120, 150. But but data helps, and if we are ready to move to the nation of the future, we have to invest heavily in data acquisition.
All right, thank you. So we have 5 minutes to go, and I just want to ask this question on the economy, and in 2 sentences, I just want you to respond. The Nigerian Senate approved on 28th of April 850 billion naira loan request by President Muhammadu Buhari from the capital market to fund some projects in the 2020 budget. Today, the president is requesting the National Assembly to consider and approve his request to borrow $5.513 billion from external sources to enable the federal government to fund the 2020 revised budget, to enable the federal government to work on priority projects, and to support state government in stimulating their economies, especially those who have been adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2 sentences, are you worried, Yinka?
No, I'm not worried, and I'll tell you why. My day job is a treasury officer, so it's a fund manager. So I manage funds and I manage debt, a huge form of debt, and I know that debt is not bad if you are using it for the right reason. The problem we've had in the past is that the debt that Nigeria took, Nigeria used it for the wrong reason. And that's where a lot of all the trust issues are coming in. So you're using your debt to consume, to first you loot it, secondly, you're using it to pay salaries and do some funny things. that will not produce a lot of
you may want to round up, sir. We are running out of
okay, fine. So I just feel that if the debts are channeled towards the right things that they say they want to use it for, we will be able to make up the numbers over the years. Besides, we have enough between our debt to GDP ratio to accommodate that.
All right, Ayo.
Yeah, very quickly, again, is to reiterate what Yinka said now, because these are simple economics that even in our day-to-day microeconomic lives, we all do the same thing. If you have a salary of 10,000 naira per month, and then you borrow money of 15,000 naira to use it to buy a car or something, where are you going to get the payments for the extra 5,000 naira from? That is if you see anybody who does that, you think they are wasteful. But if you borrow money of 7,000 naira to use it to service your day-to-day issues, while you know that your 10,000 salary is coming, that is still fair enough. But better still, of course, would be if you borrow less than what you get as a salary and use it to buy something, to use it to start another business that will earn money. Then that, of course, would be like perfect economic sense. So none of this is strange even to the people in power. The question again comes for me is, where is the political will? Who wants to be the person that wants to say this way this country is structured cannot work without us continue to do the bad things? And if we continue to do the bad things, everybody will be happy for the short term, but in the long term, more problems will arise. So again, political will.
All right, thank you very much. This has been a very, very insightful conversation. I mean, I'm so excited to have moderated this panel. Very, very bold ideas. You are the ones who said them, but you may not know the impact that it's had. And I believe that everyone watching us from Facebook, those who are also on Zoom here, we believe that you'll be leaving this forum, this webinar tonight, loaded with a lot of insights on what's going on in Nigeria and the way forward. I would like to remind us that one of the key points that we've taken out of this place is that we cannot go anywhere without data, and we want to appeal to all of the persons who are stakeholders, just both citizens and government, to ensure that there's a push for this. I would want to just add my own point, which is the Lagos example. Lagos has a data capturing agency. I'm registered as a resident of Lagos, LASRA. And so I think that that's an example of, if all states do that, we may be able to get something close to reasonable data to plan with, not this guesswork. And I really like what Yinka said about the disparity between what we put out there as our population and what really is. So it's 7 p.m. already. I'll be signing out, but I want to remind every one of us that Thursday Talks holds on the last Thursday of every month, and this was brought to you by Enough is Enough Nigeria, the Future Project, BudgIT, and YNaija. Thank you so much, Yinka, for making our time to be a panelist on tonight's conversation. We are really, really honored, and we hope you would oblige when next we call you.
Thanks for having me, Temidayo.
And Ayo, thank you so much for making our time to also be a part of tonight's panel. It's been very insightful, and we hope you would oblige when we call you subsequently.
You're welcome, and thanks for the invitation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here you have it. My name is Temidayo Sadiq. I'm assistant editor at YNaija, what the smartest young people read. And we like you to stay glued to this Thursday Talk program. And we hope that in the coming days, we'll get out of this pandemic and with thicker solutions, and all of us will be the better for it. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.